One of the things that struck me since I've been doing the rounds, we've been doing roadshows in various places on this subject, is that while the people in the room, I assume the people in the room know what the named person is, otherwise he wouldn't be here. That's my presumption. But my other presumption is that 95% of the population have absolutely no idea what it is. I do still, although I've said this for the last 2 months and have done nothing about it, I do still plan to do a little bit of research where I just get some helpers out on the streets, probably in Dundee, and just say to people, have you heard of the named person? And just see how many people actually know that this thing exists, which is one of the things that does worry me quite a lot today, that there seems to be laws passed with very little relationship between the people who it's going to affect. So this roadshow is a spin-off from a conference that I organised with various groups, but the Christian Institute in particular helped out with that. At Edinburgh about 2 months ago now, 3 months ago. I said, I keep getting, I'm a month behind each time I say this. A few months ago now, we had a conference in Edinburgh on this subject where there was over 200 people, and quite a good launch of the website, the petition, the campaign, and so on. And Michael will be speaking later about the ins and outs of things that we're trying to do in terms of the campaign. Again, as I say, I assume you know about the named person. If you don't, in a nutshell, every child from birth to 18 will now have a state-named individual to oversee their interests and to oversee their safety, which is one of the things that's inbuilt into the promotion of the named person idea. And immediately when talking to friends and colleagues about this, one of the things that struck me was that when I was a child, first born, out I come, and my mother also gives me a named person called my godparents. But it was my mother that gave me a named person, not the state. And there does seem to be something quite profound and problematic about the state giving every child a named person in relation to the family and the state's relationship with the family, which hopefully we'll explore today through the speakers and through yourselves. I'll just give a little bit of background about my interest, and then I'll explain the running order in terms of how things are going to work today. As I said, I'm a lecturer. I also set up a charity a number of years ago called Generation Youth Issues. And one of the issues that we were looking at was the over-regulation of young people and children's lives. So one of the themes that we started to look at was this idea of cotton wool kids. And actually a friend of mine is in the middle of a PhD, hopefully writing a book where he's interviewed people in their 60s, 70s and 80s about their experiences as children, and then contrasting that with children of today's generation, who were supposed to be all free and all the rest of it. But actually, when you look at the reality, people in their 70s explain that they went to school across train tracks, cycled 10 miles, got a helicopter, rode across rivers, etc. Anyway, you get the picture in terms of how things have changed, despite my exaggeration. That was the sort of stuff we were interested in terms of how society's changed and whether there are problems with this. One of the things I started to look at was the increasing interest in early intervention by the state, by politicians, by social work services, even by the police, in terms of how we can solve society's problems. And it's a very interesting thing. If you don't know much about early intervention, I can promise you it's probably the biggest new policy initiative for the last 10 years and will be, I suspect, for the next 10 years. And essentially early intervention says this: if you don't get in early, and make the parents really, really good parents, then those kids are finished. And almost every problem in society are being targeted at parents and the type of parenting that takes place. And the thing I was thinking about this on the train up here, that even if that were true, which I don't think it is, I don't think, you can have this world where you just have wonderful parents and all society's problems are solved. Even if that were true, the state involving itself in trying to make every parent a great parent is actually probably the worst thing you can actually do for families. And I was saying a little bit about the research I was doing earlier. I've done a fair bit of research looking at family policy. And the thing I was particularly interested in was to look at this idea of the autonomous family, right? The idea of the free autonomous family. And I could tell you, I was going to say it almost doesn't exist in policy, but that wouldn't be true. It doesn't exist at all in policy. Right? If you look at policy, there is no understanding of the idea of the autonomous family. Right? Absolutely none at all in terms of how policy understands things. Essentially, policy today looks at the family in terms of how much support we can give the family. Right? That's the sort of framework of social policy, which again I think needs to be questioned to some extent to see whether this is beneficial or not. Finally, the last thing I would say in terms of my concerns about the named person initiative is the problem of the way it's projected in terms of children's safety. The idea that we need to keep children safe. Because as far as I can see, the idea of child safety in this country has gone beyond any rational sense of safety for children. It's not, it doesn't seem to be a sort of simple, commonsensical thing, child safety. It seems to be a kind of all-encompassing framework that is extremely problematic and often irrational rather than rational. And even without going into details about the programme, there was a programme on the television a few months ago, and the head of the Social Work Federation described the framework that social workers work in as a culture of fear. Right? That was her description of the framework of how social workers work today. And that's one of my biggest concerns, that I do think there is a culture of fear in society, especially around children. And that, to me, makes it very, very problematic if we start having named individuals looking out for the safety and interests of every single child.